Okay, let's get into this. It's hard to be online for long these days without, seeing the buzz around online content creation, the money involved.
Right, and OnlyFans is always part of that conversation, isn't it? Huge numbers being thrown around.
Exactly. We've all seen those headlines. Creators supposedly earning more than, like, major celebrities or top athletes. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And what's interesting is how this whole digital economy is, well, it's not just generating wealth, it's also raising a ton of questions about where the money comes from, the systems behind it.
Yeah, it changes how you think about finance, entertainment, everything.
A real shift.
So for this deep dive, we wanted to go beyond just the flashy headlines. We really want to dig into the financial engine driving OnlyFans.
Okay.
We've got a few different sources lined up. There are news articles about Sophie Rain's alleged earnings, massive numbers, and the reaction to that.
Right, the $43 million figure.
Yeah. Then we're looking at some Reddit discussions, people asking questions, some pretty skeptical takes on whether it's all legitimate.
Different perspectives there.
And importantly, there's a university report, University of Northern Colorado. It looks at a much darker side sex trafficking documented on the platform.
That sounds heavy. Yeah.
And finally, some other articles touching on potential money laundering exploitation concerns. So quite a mix.
It definitely gives us different angles on a really complex picture. It's clearly not just about individual success stories. There are these underlying mechanics and some very serious accusations.
Exactly. So our goal today is to sort of navigate through all this, the different viewpoints, the sometimes conflicting info, just to give you a clearer, maybe more nuanced picture of how money flows on OnlyFans and what the wider impact might be.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's start where a lot of the recent buzz kicked off. Sophie Rain. And that reported $43 million earnings figure for 2024.
Yeah, that number definitely stops you in your tracks. The articles made that comparison, didn't they? More than NBA star Jason Tatum.
Right. And putting it next to a name like that really hammers home the scale we're talking about. No wonder it blew up online.
Absolutely. So much discussion, disbelief.
And it wasn't just the total. Apparently, her #1 fan spent over $4.7 million on her content in 1 year.
Wow. $4.7 million.
When you hear that, you immediately think, well, what's going on there? How is that possible?
Yeah.
Social media is full of that.
Yeah, what exactly are you buying for that kind of money? It raises questions about the whole dynamic. You saw people online contrasting it with, like, Ruby Rose. Someone offered her a lot of money, and she apparently at least took a picture with the fan.
Right, some interaction.
Whereas with Rain, the reports didn't suggest that kind of direct interaction happened with this top spender. It makes you think about the transaction itself, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It got to the point where Adam22, the podcaster, he publicly doubted it, asked for proof, like screen recordings.
And did she provide it?
She did, apparently. Shared a recording, basically standing by the numbers. So it gives us a look, maybe an extreme one, but a look at the potential at the very, very top.
It's wild. What does that tell us? An individual creator potentially out-earning established pro athletes.
It really messes with our usual ideas of fame and how wealth is made, doesn't it?
Totally. And the article had another big statistic, too. In 2023, OnlyFans creators collectively pulled in $6.6 billion.
Billion? With a B.
Yeah. And get this, that's more than the combined salaries of all NBA players on max contracts.
That comparison again. It just shows the enormous financial weight of this platform.
Immense. A huge concentration of money.
And when you see figures like that, $6.6 billion, the $43 million, well, it's only natural that people start asking, okay, is this all above board? How legitimate are these massive flows of cash?
Right. Which brings us to those Reddit discussions you mentioned.
Exactly. Places like For Conspiracy are no stupid questions. People are seriously debating if OnlyFans could be used sometimes for money laundering.
Well, with that kind of volume, you can see why the question comes up. What are the main arguments they're making?
The Reddit threads point to a few things. How easy it seems to move money via subscriptions, the potential for fake accounts, maybe anonymous ones, and just these huge sums being spent by one person, like the $4.7 million example. It fuels suspicion.
The idea being you could use it to clean money.
Sort of. You see comments suggesting someone could pay for content, maybe get a kickback from the creator, making illicit funds look like legitimate earnings. The perceived anonymity seems key to these theories.
But there are counter-arguments on Reddit too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Some people bring up the ID verification OnlyFans says it does.
Though the effectiveness of that is often questioned.
True. Others just argue, look, there are genuinely tons of people willing to pay for this content, and maybe it's about sex workers finally controlling their own income, financial empowerment.
That's a really interesting contrast. Empowerment versus potential crime happening side by side.
But the money laundering idea sticks around,
Uh-huh.
especially those large donations or big spends. Could that be a way to wash dirty money?
It's interesting how they try to map traditional laundering ideas onto this digital space. The Reddit threads mention things like prepaid cards or creating what they call common person names, CPNs.
Yeah, CPNs. What exactly are those again?
It's basically like setting up a fake credit profile.
Right.
Sometimes used to try and get around credit checks or hide who's really behind a transaction,
Right.
a way to obscure the trail.
Okay, gotcha. But someone else on Reddit made a good point about OnlyFans cut. They take 20%, right?
Mm.
So the argument was that 20% off the top makes it maybe less efficient for typical money laundering than, say, a cash business where you could just fudge the books more easily.
That's actually a pretty sharp observation. Traditional laundering often involves inflating cash revenues. Digital trails and a big platform cut change the math.
Right.
But the flip side discussed was, once that money is paid out by OnlyFans and declared as taxable income,
Right.
maybe it looks clean then, regardless of where it originally came from.
So it's really messy. You can see why people are asking questions,
Yeah,
given the sheer scale and how the platform works.
absolutely.
But, we need to shift gears now because there's a much more serious, frankly disturbing side to this. That University of Northern Colorado report on exploitation and trafficking.
Yeah, this is crucial. The report, an in-depth financial analysis of sex trafficking on OnlyFans. It's sobering.
What makes it stand out is how they did it, right? Their methodology.
Exactly. They didn't just theorize, they analyzed actual financial data. From 13 OnlyFans accounts tied to one alleged trafficker, that includes accounts of victims and the trafficker's own transactions.
So real data, not just anecdotes.
Real data, giving a direct, data-driven look at what can happen on the platform.
And the findings. They're pretty grim.
Deeply disturbing. The report showed this alleged trafficker funneled over $1 million from each victim's account into his business accounts.
$1 million each. Generated through alleged exploitation.
And the report doesn't mince words. It says OnlyFans itself and the payment processors handling the transactions, they both profit from this exploitation.
Wow, that's a direct accusation.
It highlights the financial incentive for the platform, for the intermediaries. Even if the money comes from illegal activity, they still get their cut.
Did the report name the payment processors involved in that case?
It did. In the specific case they studied, the main ones were Innovio, CC Bill, and Securian Pay. These are the companies working behind the scenes, moving the money.
It shows how many layers there are in this whole ecosystem.
Definitely. And the report also broke down where the money, the consumption was coming from geographically for these specific allegedly trafficked accounts.
And where was it?
The U.S. was the biggest consumer, generated the most revenue, both for the trafficker and for OnlyFans, then the U.K. and Australia.
That raises some uncomfortable questions about demand, doesn't it?
It really does. They even looked at transaction costs for different things, like photos versus videos versus live streams.
Any key findings there?
One interesting detail was that U.S. consumers in that top group were the only ones really consuming live streams, and they paid a higher average price for them.
Shows different engagement patterns.
But the main point the UNC report drives home is this. They argue these payment companies, by providing the plumbing for these transactions, are essentially complicit. They profit from online sex trafficking.
And that ties into something else, doesn't it? That whistleblower complaint.
Exactly. A complaint apparently submitted to FinCEN, that's the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
Right.
And this complaint allegedly accuses huge players, MasterCard and Visa, of enabling money laundering and, crucially, not stopping their networks from being used for money linked to child sexual abuse material and sex trafficking on OnlyFans.
Those are massive allegations against major financial institutions.
Huge. Now, it's vital to say MasterCard and Visa deny this. They emphasize their compliance efforts, say they act when they find illegal activity.
Okay.
But having that complaint out there alongside the UNC report's findings, it paints a very concerning picture about potential misuse of these financial networks.
The UNC report also had suggestions for identifying traffickers, right, using digital traces.
Yeah, they looked at things like login activity, IP addresses. They found in their study 10 of the 13 accounts they examined were registered from the same IP address.
So not 13 individuals managing their own accounts, more like centralized control.
Precisely. A strong indicator that something's off. That kind of data pattern could be a red flag for exploitation. It shows there are digital footprints that could potentially be tracked.
So with all this swirling around potential money laundering, documented trafficking, what does OnlyFans itself say? What's their official stance?
Well, publicly, they state a zero-tolerance policy for child abuse and trafficking. They claim they monitor transactions, flag suspicious activity.
Okay.
You might remember they even briefly planned to ban all pornographic content. But they reversed that, reportedly due to pressure from those same payment processors.
Right, I remember that. And they do have some limits, don't they, on subscription prices, daily tips?
Yes, those limits exist. But a major criticism, highlighted in the UNC report, is the paywall, because content is behind a subscription.
It makes it harder for outsiders like law enforcement or NGOs to see what's going on, to proactively look for trafficking.
Exactly. It hinders that kind of proactive analysis and identification of potential victims.
And there was that point about the scale of the money again. The UNC report noted the profits from the specific trafficking operation they studied. It was actually a pretty small slice of OnlyFans' overall pie, right?
Yeah, something like 4% of the dividends paid to the owner during that time.
That statistic really hits hard. It's just a potential conflict, doesn't it? If the platform is making so much money overall, is the incentive strong enough to really crack down hard on illicit activity that only represents a small fraction?
It definitely raises that question about financial incentives potentially outweighing safety concerns.
Stepping back then, looking at the wider picture, the UNC report made a pretty bold conclusion about U.S. consumption.
It did. They suggested, based on their data, that individuals in the U.S. seem to be significant global consumers of commercial sex online. And they even floated a possible link between that online consumption and potentially seeking it out in person.
That's a huge societal issue.
And it leads to fundamental ethical questions for tech companies involved in the sex trade. The report basically argues that by facilitating it all, even indirectly, they risk being complicit in things like human trafficking.
Serious stuff.
Very. The report also stressed we need more research into different kinds of trafficking operations across different platforms, not just OnlyFans.
And we saw mentions elsewhere too, didn't we, about crypto? Hong Kong police tackling money laundering involving crypto.
Right. And the fact that OnlyFans itself reportedly bought a chunk of Ethereum at one point, it shows they're playing in that crypto space too.
Which just adds another layer of complexity to tracking the money.
Absolutely. You've got adult content, traditional finance, crypto.
Yeah.
It's a really complex web. Needs ongoing scrutiny.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've seen this incredible earning potential on OnlyFans, the kind of numbers that grab headlines.
Huge potential.
But digging deeper, we've found these serious questions about legitimacy. Are all these financial flows what they seem? Fueled by the platform's scale, maybe its anonymity?
And then the really dark side, documented exploitation and trafficking, with complex roles played by the platform, the payment processors.
It's definitely not a simple story, is it? Not just online success. It's got all these layers, financial, social, ethical.
A really multifaceted issue that we, need to confront.
Which leads us to a final thought, really, for you listening. When you think about this huge amount of money moving around on platforms like OnlyFans, what responsibility falls where? On the users, on the banks and payment companies, on OnlyFans itself.
Yeah. How do we ensure ethical practices? How do we prevent exploitation and crime in these spaces?
There are no easy answers.
No, definitely not. But it really pushes us to think critically, doesn't it? To look past the surface and consider all these different dimensions of this digital world that's evolving so fast. We hope this deep dive gave you some things to think about. Keep exploring, keep questioning.